Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you took some time this evening to spend with us. I'm Alyssa DeFilippo with Parents Helping Parents, and I manage a program called Connections California. And we are a statewide online resource and information hub for transition to adulthood and adult services. So this evening, we're going to talk about transition planning, the basics, and we have presenters from the California Transition Alliance with us. And if you are not aware of what the California Transition Alliance is, I am very glad that you tuned in tonight because you will find after this evening, when you learn about the organization and the resources they have, you'll find it's just a wonderful resource for parents and professionals. And we're blessed with not one, not two, but soon joining us a third person from the California Transition Alliance to present with us this evening. Joyce Montgomery is here. She is co-president of the California Transition Alliance, and she has over 30 years experience in public school special education, successfully implementing collaborative employment transition programs with the Department of Rehab, the California Department of Education, workforce investment, and local school districts. With too many state and local advisory councils to name here, including a Senate Select Committee, Joyce has chaired and/or served tirelessly to increase the employment of people with disabilities. Currently an assistant professor and clinical coordinator at Torrington University and also a published author. Also with us this evening is Tracy Hurd. She has been a special education high school teacher for 21 years, and while she was working as a resource specialist, Tracy realized there was a huge disparity between general and special education exposure to appropriate college and career readiness preparation. She became dedicated to providing students with IEPs with the resources and tools necessary to a successful post-secondary future. And joining us kind of midway will be Dee Torrington. She is also co-president of California Transition Alliance, and she's been a special educator for 24 years and has held leadership positions, again, in a number of special education associations, too many to mention. And her passion has always been to support other teachers in the field, and she has worked many years as a teaching mentor for the Sacramento County Office of Education. Phew, that was a lot. I thank our presenters for being here. I thank Gabriel, of course, for translating and interpreting. And I thank all of you for being here because without you, we wouldn't be here. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for having us. Again, I'm Joyce Montgomery, co-president with the California Transition Alliance. And we are here today to share with you a presentation that has been put together with a tool that we have used for many years called The Basics. And it's transition planning for secondary transition. And there is many useful tools and resources that you can find in this document. And then we are currently in the process of revamping it. So we're bringing in some new material that will be included in our presentation that we'll be sharing with you today. So we'd like to first start off with a introduction video that kind of gets us in the frame of what we're talking about here with supporting your child's transition and really creating that navigating a path to independence as the focus. So here we go.
Break down something really important for families of students with special education needs in for life after high school. And, this topic has seen some huge positive changes lately that you're going to want to know about. So if you're a parent, I get it. Looking ahead, trying to plan for what comes next, it can feel like this massive, overwhelming challenge. So many questions, right? But here's the thing. You are definitely not alone in this. And the good news is there's actually a roadmap designed to help you navigate the whole thing. And that roadmap, it's called transition planning. But don't think of it as just a bunch of legal boxes to check. It's really a process, a continuous one, that's designed to turn all that uncertainty into real hope, confidence in what your child can do, and trust in the path you're building together. All right, so what exactly is this plan for the future? Well, at its very core, transition planning is a required and super vital part of your child's Individualized Education Program, the IEP. So that sounds a little formal, right? Let's break it down. It really boils down to one key thing: getting your child ready for life after they leave the school system. And that means everything. We're talking further education, job training, finding employment, and where it makes sense, developing those crucial skills for living independently. Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. This entire process just got a major, and I mean majorly beneficial update here in California. It is a total game changer for families. There's a new law. It's called Assembly Bill 438, and it has completely changed the timeline for when this planning gets started. And believe me, this isn't some small procedural tweak. It's a huge deal for making sure every student gets a truly effective plan. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The old way, planning didn't have to start until a student was already 16. For a lot of kids, that was just too late to really build a solid foundation. But now, with the new law that kicks in on July 1st, 2025, the planning has to start before your child even sets foot in high school. This is a massive shift from being reactive to being truly proactive. So why does starting so much earlier really matter? Well, it's all about having more time. It gives the whole team, that's you, your child, the educators, way more runway to create a plan that's actually personalized. It means more time to explore job training, to build life skills, to solve problems before they become huge obstacles, and to get connected with all the amazing support services out there in the community. But this isn't just about moving up the timeline. It's about a much deeper shift in how we think about this. It's really about who this whole plan is for, and more importantly, who should be leading the way. And here's the absolute most crucial point. The student has to be at the very center of everything. It's their future, it's their dreams, and it's their plan. It's not something that's done to them, it's something that is done with them, and in the best case, by them. The whole goal here is to shift your child from being just a passenger along for the ride to being the one in the driver's seat. It's all about empowering them to grab the wheel and steer their own life toward the goals they want to achieve. So how do we do that? Well, it comes down to focusing on two absolutely fundamental skills. First up is self-determination. That's the ability to set your own goals and make your own choices. And second is self-advocacy, which is all about being able to use your voice to say what you need to succeed. These are the two keys that unlock everything else. Okay, so if the student is the driver, how do we figure out where they're going? You can't just start driving without a map, right? That is exactly where assessments come into play. So the very first step before you do anything else is to really, truly understand your child. What are their unique strengths? What do they actually like to do? What things genuinely spark their interest? This is the foundation that everything else is built on. Now, I know when you hear the word assessment, your mind probably jumps to some high-stakes test. But in this case, it is completely different. I want you to think of these assessments not as something to pass or fail, but as discovery tools. They're like a flashlight, helping to shine a light on what motivates your child and what they're awesome at. And these discovery tools, they basically come in two main flavors. On one hand, you've got your formal assessments. These are the more standardized things like aptitude tests or interest inventories. But then you have informal assessments, which are just as powerful. We're talking about things like interviews, questionnaires, or even just observing your child to see what makes them light up. So, the whole point of all this discovery and planning isn't just to collect a bunch of information. It's all leading to one thing: a clear, tangible outcome for what happens after high school. In other words, a post-secondary goal. A good goal isn't just some vague wish. No, it has to be specific and measurable. It has to be based directly on what you learned about your child's real interests. And it's an outcome, like get a paid job at the animal shelter, not just a process like look for jobs. And maybe most importantly, a goal set in stone. It's a living thing that you review every single year because your child is going to grow and change. So these goals usually fall into three big buckets that pretty much cover adult life, right? You've got education and training. What kind of learning comes next? Then there's employment. What kind of work do they want to do? Finally, independent living. What skills do they need for stuff like managing money or getting from point A to point B? And check this out. Here is a fantastic, super practical tool to help pull this all together. This little formula helps you structure the goal so it actually starts from your child's point of view. It literally puts the student right at the beginning of the sentence, making sure their voice is loud and clear. It's such a simple but really powerful way to frame the future. At the end of the day, the biggest takeaway is this. Transition planning, especially with this new early start law, completely changes the conversation. It shifts everyone away from focusing on limitations and what your child can't do, and instead it builds this proactive, hopeful journey that's all about what they can do, and even more importantly, who they truly want to become.
Okay, so thank you for watching that video with us. And again, it's an overview. We know it was really fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. And again, the California Transition Planning, the Basics Guide on our website is a tool that you can refer back to. So as we begin this destination of transition planning, we're rooted in some very core anchor beliefs in building for our children so that they can continue this process to move from school to post-school activities. So the hope and believing in a future that they can achieve, confidence, building skills that they'll be able to navigate the future, and trust in the partners that they'll be working with on this journey, which includes families and schools and agencies. So as I talked about in the video, there are these core areas that we look at in transition planning. There must be a post-secondary goal for education and training, employment, and then if the IEP team determines it's necessary, independent living. And along the way, there are things that will be added to your toolbox so that your child will be able to be successful in that. So those becomes those transition services. But again, the engine, a self-determination theory, and I know that you had high quality IEP teams with you guys, so many of you had that presentation from them where they really talked about the importance of Ascend with building those self-determination skills. And it really is the idea that if our students are empowered to be able to pursue their own success, then their outcomes are going to be more likely to be achieved. And so by building those things through competence, belonging, autonomy, some basic skills that we can work on. And as parents, as things that you can do. So it talked in the video about starting early, which is a big piece to that we can start building in that individual support at an earlier age, looking at having a longer runway for that process to happen. So instead of 16 to graduation, now it's entering high school until when the student exits school, either at graduation or at 22, however that looks like. So we've included here a really important checklist, and this is something that's in the Basics Guide, and it's 8 areas of compliance that your case manager teacher is looking at when they're developing a transition plan, and you as a parent can have your own checklist to see if these things are included as well. So having the student invited, they don't have to necessarily attend if they don't feel they can do that at that point, particularly maybe even in early ages. But the idea that they need to participate in some way is key there. And some way can be age-appropriate assessment, which is the next piece. It is a foundation of the plan. It has to be in academic, social, emotional, interests, preferences, all those things can be assessed to help develop those measurable post-secondary goals, as we talked about in education, employment, and independent living if the IEP team decides necessary. And starting early also really allows that course of study to start early. So now you're looking at 9th grade, being able to build that course of study out until the student graduates or exits at 22. And then along that way, for each year, you're having these transition service activities that are part of your annual IEP goals that you'll be having each year that need to be updated. And the idea that having agency representation at those transition planning meetings is important, especially if they're going to be helping to fund any types of activities after the student leaves school. Another piece is talked about in part of transition is the age of majority. So once a student turns 18, the student now will have their educational rights, unless, of course, the student is conserved. And again, there has to be a legal document that shows that the parent does have the educational rights. Otherwise, your student at 18 will be the one signing off on their transition plan. So again, looking back at what they talked about this in the video, there's different types of assessment. There can be formal assessments that can be used, but also informal assessments. In a way, a parent can assist in part of that process is through interviews or questionnaires to kind of help to guide the process of, to help this to identify the student's interests so that they can be having informed choice. And there's many tools that are available. Many of these are also linked on our website, but we have, ONET, California Career Zone, My Next Move. We also have some AI tools that are available that can help with the goal writing process. And so there's many tools that are available to us as educators to help as we create these post-secondary goals with the student. And again, those goals, they must be measurable and based on assessment. And they have to identify an outcome. So that's specifically, it talks about that in the law, that it is an outcome-oriented, not just a process. There has to be an outcome. When we look at education and training, and we look at employment and as needed, if appropriate, independent living. So again, putting that student in the driver's seat is a critical component of all of this. So the student being the I in the IEP so that their voices, and again, it talks about that in the law, we have to consider the student's interests and preferences in developing those post-secondary goals. Allowing them to lead the meeting if at all possible. There's lots of opportunities out there to learn about student-led IEPs. And so that might be something to consider as a way to build that competency with your child. And then this allows the parent's role to shift. So now instead of the parent having to speak for the child, giving the opportunity to be more of a mentor and a coach and an advocate. So we don't want you to not, keep in there and making sure your child gets everything they need, but thinking about it as turning it into more that coach role so that you can have some of the actionable steps that you can do so your student can take more of a lead in that journey. And so again, thinking about that with your case manager teacher about how that you might be able to do that. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to lead us through the middle part of this journey. Tracy, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. As previously mentioned, I am a high school resource teacher and have been actually for 24 years this year, and the resident transition specialist at my high school. And this is the fun part, is the actual planning and ensuring that we're working with our IEP team to devise not only good transition goals, but also coming up with an action plan to make sure that our students are as successful as possible once they graduate high school. So when the students enter high school, what are we doing? We are selecting an appropriate course of study to either help them gain a high school diploma or either a certificate of completion. Oops. So one of the main things that we have to really take into consideration when we're planning our transition goals and our action plans is what pathway we want to direct our students down and actually, what can they actually do? So the high school diploma is geared for those students that can actually do the coursework. They have to meet the regular high school diploma requirements as mandated by the state. And resource students, special education students, high functioning SA students are all eligible to work towards a high school diploma with accommodations, of course, if needed. The certificate of completion is a little bit different, in which is for those students who may need a little bit of additional support, but they cannot meet the regular outlined diploma requirements. And then we have the alternative diploma pathway. And these are for our students who have significant cognitive disabilities and need a great deal of support to be able to navigate the whole high school experience. Okay, so what tools do we need to help support our students through this process? And what is the purpose for doing that? So the goal of the entire transition plan is to ensure that our students develop as much as possible self-determination and independent living skills. And that's advocacy, so where they can speak to individuals about what their disabilities are and what their needs are, and learn what to ask for to meet their individual needs. Also on vocational and career development as appropriate and as desired. And also independent living skills in college and career readiness. College readiness is a huge, I wouldn't say issue, but caveat for some of our students that are in the special education program. And it's very important that parents and students understand that they do have collegiate options after high school. We just have to know how to go about obtaining those resources to help them navigate that particular platform. So parents, what can you do to help navigate that? Make sure that you're at these meetings and that you're asking the appropriate questions and that you're inquiring, what is available for your student while they're in high school. Okay. And during the meeting, of course, we want to always participate and ensure that the plan of action in place is outlined and that the goals are being followed to the best of everyone's ability and that there's evidence to support those goals and the outcomes. Okay. We can go to the next one. So phase one, that's when students are entering high school. And for age 14 to 16, we want to encourage students to start looking at maybe what they may want to do and maybe what may be appropriate based upon their individual skill set and also what their desired transition goals are, as well as yours. So how do we do that? We do that through assessments, and it can be anything from formal assessments to informal assessments and conversations and questionnaires with students. Me, myself, I utilize digital platform. I love California Career Zone and ONET, but I utilize those platforms because they are digital and they're accessible for students even after they graduate. And they can perform all types of different research to help them kind of make a more informed career decision in regards to what their transition goals are. And parents, you also can have access to it as well. And it actually documents. It's just documentation evidence that students are working towards, meeting certain transition goals. We also want to make sure while they're in high school that they're learning to speak for themselves and advocate for themselves and speak with their case manager about, if they're struggling in their classes, if they have a particular class that they want to take or pathway that they want to follow. We want to encourage students to voice not only, what their disabilities are, but what can we do to support them through the high school process. High school, I work at a school where there's nearly 5,000 students, and it can be extremely overwhelming for our particular population. So self-advocacy skills, even from our higher functioning special education student to our lower functioning is very, very important to develop. And we also want to build the independent living skills. And those are just the basic life skills that our students need to navigate life while they're in high school as they get older and after. And community-based involvement whenever available and possible for our students. Phase two. Now, this is where it kind of can get a little bit sticky because we really want them to start practicing these self-advocacy skills and being independent and not only seeking services, but initiating that process. So this is about 11th grade, usually, or sometimes in the second semester, sophomore year. It depends on your case manager and also the individual needs of the students. Me, myself, I usually start talking about transition services or support services for students the second semester of their sophomore year and really start hitting it hard junior year, because that's when we can start submitting applications and making hard inquiries for services that are in the best interest of our students based upon their IEP and transition goal needs. So what are adult services? Though that's Department of Rehabilitation, that's the Inland Regional Center. Those are the services that are going to provide services for your students after they graduate. So the earlier you submit those applications, the better, and the follow-up has to be there to ensure that your application is processed within a reasonable amount of time, which can be speculative at best, but that's why it's important to start that process early. And whenever possible, any type of work experience or volunteer experience to help students build those soft skills that are needed out in the community, in the workforce, and on the college campuses. It helps build like communication skills, teamwork and collaboration, and again, those basic life skills that our students need to be successful in life. And also, the post-secondary research. We have to be realistic sometimes, not only what our students can do, but what we have accessible at our fingertips and what's convenient for our students to be able to access. So it's really important also that we really start looking at what type of work environment our students will be able to be successful in and prosper in, and even also different collegiate campuses and environments that provides the appropriate services for our students. Community colleges now, they have a plethora of support services available for our students. The key to getting those services is knowing about them and accessing those services. So don't be afraid to contact a college and ask, like, do you have services for students with disabilities or learning disabilities on their campuses? And I can tell you probably 9.9 times out of 10, there's an office there specifically for students that may need some extra academic support or guidance on those campuses. Okay. Health and legal support. So we want to make sure that, and when possible, our students are able to articulate their needs, whether it's their health needs and the health or legal needs, or that they're just informed about like basic insurances and how to be able to seek services when in need. Okay, the last stretch, the transition when they're out of there from 18 and on. So students aware, usually that's a little clause in our IEP, that they are informed that at 18 they actually inherit all of their educational rights. Before a student usually hits 18, when I'm working with them on my caseload, I try to make sure that they're aware of all of the responsibilities that are inherited when they're 18, that they have to apply for driver's license, they have to get that appropriate documentation so that they'll be able to apply for support services, that they know what their social security number is in case they have to apply for any other support service that requires that they know how to fill out applications, that they know, what information is needed to be successful, not only in the application process, but also during an interviewing process, and how to disclose or whether they should disclose their disabilities to potential employers. Housing assistance as needed, but that's something that, as case managers, we really don't have a lot of access to, but we can make recommendations. I've had students before where I've had to recommend for housing assistance, but there's waiting lists. Once they're out of school, out of the high school setting, we go into what's called 88, which I will go into a little bit later, where we have to wait for services. It's not automatic any longer. Okay. So from 18 to 22, these are the categories that we focus on for that particular group from 18 to 22. Students can continually access post-secondary educational supports and services and training. Just because a student has an IEP, whatever level, does not mean that they cannot work towards a certificate, an associate's degree, or even a four-year degree. Right now, I have a student that has some pretty severe disabilities, cognitive developmental issues, but now he's at Cal State Fullerton working on his master's degree with the support of some of these outside support services. Did it take him a little bit longer? Absolutely, it did. But with the supports that were available for him, he was able to be successful to navigate that whole post-secondary educational platform. And whether or not also they enter the workforce, there's also supports that students can actually access through Department of Rehabilitation or vocational support programs to actually help them, if they're able to navigate that workforce arena as well. And that feeds directly into independent living skill development. We want our students to be as independent as possible. So there, we really try to hit hard in this area, and to ensure that they learn how to be familiar with public transportation, how to look for an apartment, how to pay bills, how to cook for themselves or wash for themselves and shop. Those are things that are covered within the 18 and 22 programs that, again, students are highly in need for. And also to navigate like just adult systems in general. That those are again support services departments. That is the DMV. That is the Social Security Administration, which can be highly, frustrating sometimes when you're following up on your services. That's what any public service support service agency that you may need to get support from. They kind of sometimes work on their own time frame. So it's very important to be patient and learn how to appropriately navigate that system and also when to ask for support and help with navigating that system. And also building a community based in support. Navigating the community and learning what's in your community as supports is extremely important for our population because there's always services out there, but again, a lot of the times we're just not knowledgeable of those services. And lastly, the legal and financial planning for adulthood. That's knowing how to not only make money and obtain money, but how to manage it to the best of your ability and accessing still what is out there available to help financially support our students moving forward into adulthood. Okay. So the support crew in turning 18. So as I previously mentioned, when students turn 18, they're out of our control. I have students that, when they turn 18, they know their rights, which means that they can hold an IEP, without their parent, unfortunately, but then they'll fight me on something else. But, some kids are also a little bit afraid of turning 18 because they're afraid of those responsibilities. So it's very important for us as case managers and even as parents to sit our students down and really speak with them honestly about some of the responsibilities that are inherited at the age of 18 because I tell a lot of parents, the colleges, they will take your money, but they will not speak to you directly because they don't have to at that time. So it's very important that students are aware of that as well as parents that, we have to be clear as to what expectations are and how society will regard them moving forward as a young adult. Okay. Schools must invite representatives from agencies likely to provide services at the transition meeting. I like to really do that senior year, especially if I have a student that I know is going to be accessing in the regional center or department of rehabilitation. It's really important that someone from those agencies, especially if the student is not already connected with the agency, is at these meetings or there's a meeting scheduled where you could sit down as a team and discuss a transition plan and appropriate services at that time. Support services and agencies and school age. There are some services that are available while your student is in school. Actually, there's a lot of services. The Workability One program and Transition Partnership program, I actually teach a class specifically where we service students via the Workability program. So there's a lot of like CBIs that we actually want with community-based outings that we take our students on from going to work environments where we have managers or other employees speak to them about expected employee behaviors, the hiring process, even how to dress, and the appropriateness of using like social media and their phones, in the workplace. We take students to colleges as well because unfortunately sometimes our students on IEPs are not always exposed to college campuses. So again, they're unaware as to what is available to them, if they were to decide to go to college. So there are programs on your high school campuses that are available to your students also. We just have to ensure that we're asking for these programs. Okay, so entitlement versus eligibility. Now, I'm actually working with my students right now on IDE, the difference between IDEA and ADA. And unfortunately, a lot of students, we kind of spoil them in high school because we're there for them to kind of help support them through their classes, to help them select their classes, to help them fill out their paperwork. We're there to help them. And sometimes it can be kind of coddling and coddling them to the point where they don't develop those independent living skills when they move on, or independent communication skills, I'm sorry, when they move on. Because when they go to college and even in the workforce, it's ADA at that point. So the colleges, although they offer that support, they're not mandated in the same aspect that we are in the public school system. So I like that analogy of entitlement versus eligibility because there is a huge shift. So a student with IEP automatically, everyone has to adhere to the accommodations and modifications within IEP, whatever those goals are in the plan of action. We all have to adhere to making ensuring that those students are as successful as possible, and we have to do that per the law. And everything is driven through the IEP team. Once they're graduated and they go onto a college campus, there's no longer an IEP, but the student can utilize their IEP with the local disability research centers as kind of like a baseline for services versus um, a required service. So there's no longer annual IEP meetings. The student at that point has to learn how to advocate for themselves. If they're applying for support services through any other agency, there's an eligibility requirement versus automatic requirement. And unfortunately, timelines can come into play when you're talking about eligibility for services versus automatic access. And one of the downsides too students actually going out into the world, unprepared and unaware that there's a process now to accessing services is they don't follow up all the time. They forget to answer the phone calls from those unknown numbers, to answer those emails from some of those agencies asking for additional information. And sometimes they just lose out. The cases will be closed if you don't follow up. So it's very, very important for us to kind of shift that mindset from automatic services and hard deadlines to we're going to have to wait and possibly follow up consistently and numerous times to be able to get those services after they graduate high school. Okay. So is this one? Okay. So these are some of the agencies that provide support services for our students. We have the Department of Rehabilitation, which has a plethora of resources to help our students become workplace ready and to support them. Also, if they decided to go down a vocational or CTE pathway, students can actually be eligible for services and financial support through the Department of Rehabilitation, but they have to make sure that they complete the paperwork and they follow up with the Department of Rehabilitation once those applications are submitted to ensure that they have services. In the regional center, for our students usually who are intellectually delayed, they're on the spectrum, or may have severe disabilities, I've only seen a few times actually where Inland Regional Center was very active in the high school process, although the student they still have Inland Regional Center services. In the high school, they kind of pull back to kind of make sure that students are accessing whatever's available through the public school setting. And then, like end of junior year, senior year, they kind of it's important that they start working with the case managers to ensure that everything is kind of lining up as far as the students' transition goals and also their services or projected services for the students. Social Security Administration Office, if you think that your student is eligible for Social Security support services, it's important to start that application also as early as possible to ensure that you're also not only eligible for services, that you're able to receive those services by the time that they get out of high school, because there's usually a packet that a case manager or teacher has to complete to help the application be approved or not. It's a feedback packet. And just in my experience, it's better to have that student there with you versus 2 years down the line after they've graduated and you're presented with that packet. And Career One Stop, it's a one stop be all website where students they can look up, possible colleges or vocational schools that kind of fit their transition needs, or if they just want to do some research, it's another wonderful free website for them to be able to gain information and do conduct research because there's a lot out there, and our students can become very, very overwhelmed with the amount of resources and information that's out there. So I like to utilize like a couple of websites that has everything like kind of streamlined for them to help them make more informed decisions, moving forward.
Thank you, Tracy. And I think the D is joined us now. And I think that the next slide, I think, is D.
Okay, here I am. Thanks, Tracy. That was a great overview. I loved it. So some common challenges and strategic solutions to those challenges. The service cliff. So the panic people feel when their school entitlement begins to end and the child reaches 22 and has to exit the transition program. So that's something to be aware of. And a safety net that can be built is to make sure that prior to that age of 22 and your student having to leave the school system, that you've connected already with the regional center and other outside agencies that are going to support the student as they move into the next phase, which, for even students with disabilities, especially students with disabilities, this should be an exciting time in their lives, not this moment of massive dread, just like any other student who's looking forward to going to college, looking forward to looking into careers and, expanding their horizons. That should be what we're thinking about.
Excuse me, Gabriel, I'm hearing you in English. I'm sorry, Dee.
That's okay. Not trying to hang on to the old, but looking forward to the new. So that's something I really want to impress on all of us, to make sure that we're thinking about all the other support agencies out there and build in those natural supports as we move through this process. Avoid the long waiting lists, making sure that we're applying now for services that we want in the future. And then looking at the student resistance, which also comes around because of their fear of change, right? So leveraging those interests and using passions to build careers, making sure you're connecting them with mentors in careers that they're interested in. Just again, it goes back to like taking all of this on as something we're looking forward to and something that's going to be great in our future. So here are some ideas what successful outcomes could look like in terms of an employment focus. This student can work part-time in IT, uses these accommodations such as noise canceling headphones and chat for communication, partner with VR for job coaching. An education focus, earning an associate's degree using text-to-speech software connected with the Disability Services Office before starting their college career. And then community focus. So lives in a supported apartment, volunteers at the animal shelter, use travel training to master bus routes. So all of these, this is a great way of looking at connecting with these outside agencies, community supported agencies that will help students as they make the transition from the K-12 system, K-22, into the adult world. So here we are taking action in your immediate next steps. We're getting late in the presentation, so I'm going to clap. So week 1, right now, you're going to start the conversation about your future dreams, locate the recent IEP and the transition plan, and create a folder for your documents. So keeping yourself organized and you're coming up with that direction of where you want to go. The next 3 months, verifying goals in the IEP meeting, making sure that those goals are actually what is identified as the student's strength, preference, and interest, and getting them going in the direction they want to go when they leave the system. Contacting one adult agency and trying to visit a program or a job site. That is really an interesting way to go about creating this momentum, this forward momentum of moving forward and looking to the future and all the fun we're going to have. And then ongoing the long game, teaching one new independent living skill a month and networking with other parents. There's lots of support out there with other parents. So hope, confidence, and trust is the mindset for a successful transition. Your child's path may be different, but it can be extraordinary. Maintain your hope, shift your focus from deficits to possibilities. Believe that with the right support, your child can lead a fulfilling and meaningful life. Build confidence, you're the expert. You now have a roadmap and a toolkit. Trust in your ability to advocate and navigate the new system. And trust the process. Allow for the dignity of risk. Trust them to learn from mistakes, grow from their challenges, and define their own version of success. And I know as a parent, that's a tall order, but that is definitely the direction we want to go for this positive post-secondary outcome. The best time to start planning was yesterday, and the second best time is today. So here's some examples of some resources. A resource library is found on the California Transition Alliance website. That's a great place to go for more resources in all these areas: education, employment, and independent living. And our final checklist, ready for the road. Transition planning begins and ends with the student. As our friends with High Quality IEP says, nothing about me without me. So we start early as we're entering high school, We keep assessing formally and informally. Make sure you're writing goals based on assessments and align the course of study, and invite the student to lead the process. And please consider joining us and supporting us in this work, the California Transition Alliance. We have a link here to become a member if you're interested. I think, are you putting that in the chat? And we appreciate the time you spent with us tonight. I think we've left enough time now for some questions. Yes?
Yes,
Yay.
indeed. I promised we had a lot to cover, and boy, was it covered. So thank you, ladies. We very much appreciate it.
Yay.
Before we get to Q&A, I'm just, as promised, going to direct everybody's attention to the chat. You'll see two links, one for an English evaluation, one for a Spanish evaluation. If you could click on that, please. I'm going to keep returning that to those links because I like to get at least 75% participation the night of, because that just helps us to keep bringing you quality presentations like this. And if you like this presentation, we can bring you more, but we need to have you fill out those evaluations. So getting to the Q&A, there were, now please forgive me, Spanish speakers, I am translating it, and I'm hopefully I'm getting exactly what you're asking. There were a couple of questions about when you spoke about age of majority and the student being able to decide for themselves. What happens if your student maybe isn't really capable of deciding for themselves? And someone else was asking, is there any other paperwork that can be signed at a school level to be able to have you be able to answer for your child? And when would you recommend starting a conversation about durable power of attorney or supported decision making? So I know I kind of, those are like 3 or 4 questions rolled into one. So hopefully I captured that for all the Spanish speakers out there.
Yeah, so we probably all could add to it, but it is a legal process to have educational rights, and it has to be done by a judge. And so it's a court-ordered process. So I would recommend, if that's something that, that the parents, decide that that's something they want to pursue, I would recommend doing it early. But I would also say that, for our youth, our children, that given an opportunity to make decisions for their educational rights, is also something that, I would highly encourage. The idea that, we're talking about, preferences, and we said, I feel like all of our children can have ways to demonstrate their preferences. I give the example of peas. If a kid doesn't like peas, and they maybe they're nonverbal, they're going to throw those peas. So I do just want to put out there that I do feel like giving our children an opportunity to make their choices with your support, is important, but not necessarily having to take their educational rights. Team, please add.
I think, yeah, I was agreeing with you, Joyce. I believe supported decision making is something to explore, not necessarily jumping right into conservatorship, but obviously that's a choice parents will make after they've consulted with legal counsel.
Right. Okay, thank you. Also, folks are wanting to know about the alternative pathway to diploma. And I did drop a link in there about a video that was done by the folks in Sacramento. I think it was last fall, or maybe last spring. But maybe just to talk a little bit about that and how different districts might be approaching it and answering those questions. Because remember, we have a statewide audience, so some districts are talking about it and some apparently aren't.
Dee, and I know your district is doing a lot, so maybe.
Yes. Well, our district has developed a curriculum for students to follow, and it really has beefed up the way we do transition plans in the IEP meeting, making sure that we address the course of study every time we meet. So every child, even on an alternate pathway, obviously has a course of study they're following. So we've developed these courses of study based on sort of modified curriculum, but they're getting grades as they move along, just like their non-disabled peers. And that is something that's addressed every time you meet for transition and go through the transition part of the IEP meeting, where you talk about how they progress through their course of study. So, and they do end with a alternate pathway diploma, which does not preclude them from being able to participate in the transition program, the 18 to 22 program.
Right. And they do need to also be taking the alternate assessment to be
Right.
eligible for that. So, so that's something to think about as well for parents when you're deciding what assessment that your child is taking, if they to be able to be eligible for that pathway.
Okay, great. Thank you. What about students who need daily living and adaptive skills but are able to earn a diploma if they are 18? I guess, what's a pathway for them? Any suggestions for that group as
I mean,
to?
well, once they turn 18 and they've received a traditional diploma, then they exit the public school system, right? So they would go on to other outside agencies for support at that point.
I highly recommend just being a high school teacher if they're able to work even with a job coach, that you reach out and start that process with the Department of Rehabilitation. Because again, they have a plethora of support services, for our students. So if they're able to work, if they're able to function, independently in their daily lives, the Department of Rehabilitation is a huge resource. And if they're not able to help, then they're able to recommend other agencies for them as well.
Yeah, they do have an independent living arm of the Department of Rehabilitation that not a lot of folks are aware of. So that's something to look at. And then there's also the opportunities, because we know that this is an issue for some of our students who are 100% in gen ed classes, and they don't have those additional classes that really focus on things like independent living, et cetera. But there are there are some different types of resources that you can look at, even online, about independent living. There's the Casey's skills assessment that addresses, going through like what are some important things that you should consider for independent living. So as a parent, that might be something that, while it's not the school's role, is taking that on, but you can look at that as well and see, what are the areas that you could do. And some banks actually have some really cool financial literacy programs that they do for youth. That's not part of the school curriculum, but it can help youth to learn about finances. And you can also, and for like transportation, you can contact like your local transportation, whoever's doing that in your city. And they often have training programs to train people how to ride the bus. So while these may not be part of the school curriculum, there are some different things out there that you can access to help your child to be more independent on their own.
Okay, thanks. And then there's still a little confusion about what happens to the IEP when the student leaves high school, if they are going onto a transition program or still in the educational system, or if they absolutely leave and go on to another post-secondary education.
Well, I can address the post-secondary piece. The IEP, the students, when after they graduate, if they decide they want to go to community college, or if they're, fortunate enough to have applied and been accepted to a four-year college, there are support services available to those students. They will need to have a copy of their IEP. And again, the IEP is used as a baseline for services moving forward. So it's very important they, again, make a connection with the college campus's Disability Resource Center. I've done like extensive, research in regards to community colleges, and I have not come across a community college yet in California that does not have some type of support service office for students with disabilities. So they can take their IEP to the Disability Resource Centers to access and apply for services, but they have to do that. And it's important that that process starts, I would recommend second semester senior year, because there may be a separate application for it aside from the community college application. There's probably going to be an orientation that has to be completed, for them to be able to review their IEP and to determine what accommodations moving forward will be more beneficial for that student.
And then to add to that for our students, that if the student is on the alternate pathway and they get a diploma, they can still attend an 18 to 22 program and continue on with their IEP. So if the student is still continuing to be part of the post-secondary school services that are part of the K-12. So I know that that gets confusing when we talk post-secondary sometimes, because we say post-secondary goals that we're referring to after the student leaves school when they graduate and or turn 22. But then many schools, they have what they call post-secondary programs for 18 to 22. That is part of the K-12 secondary school system. It's not separate. So when you write a post-secondary goal, you're not writing it that the student would attend my post-secondary school at my high school. You're writing it for after they leave that program.
You've just answered the question I was about to ask. So I don't know if you saw that question, but someone was asking about how could transition post-secondary goals be measurable? So okay,
Yeah,
we have answered that.
and I will say that there is part of the 1 year after the students leave school, the school district is going to be calling or sending a letter or sending an email and asking, what is the child doing for education? What is the child doing for employment? And where are they living? So the school does follow up 1 year after the student leaves. It's part of the indicator 14. So they do want to see that that goal is measurable, because they're going to be looking at that a year from now to see what's happening.
And maybe just this is a good lead into just to explain what a summary of performance is.
Yeah, so the summary performance, which is part of the typically it's done as part of the final IEP, but it doesn't have to be. But it's just basically like you talk about present levels of performance. This is okay. Now where are they now? So where we started, and now what kind of accommodations might the student need? What kind, where are they at as far as their performance, basically, right? So it's a bit like a present level performance, but a summary, like where are we at right now? And that is just part of the IEP itself. And so typically it's done as that either final IEP meeting. And so it's not a separate document for most schools. I mean, there could be some schools out there that are doing it as a separate document. I don't know of any. Typically it's part of it. Is that how you guys do it, Dee?
Well, I was just thinking it's also what we would have the kids take to the community college when they're connecting with DSPS. It has all of the where they landed, what the accommodations they have, the present levels. So.
Okay, well, I like this. This is just when what I do is I take the Spanish and I translate it so I can say it to you in English, so Gabriel can say it in Spanish. And somebody saying, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for all this information. My daughter doesn't have an IEP yet, and I'm learning so much to prepare myself and be able to support her. So I am going to add my thank you so much to this woman's thank you so much, because we're very grateful. We have a very inquisitive statewide community. We still have questions left in the box, and I apologize for that, but that seems to be always the way. It is 7:31, and by the clock on the screen, I do like to start on time and end on time, because that's how we keep this running, this engine running the way we're running it. We want to thank Joyce and Tracy and Dee for your time and for your expertise and your wisdom. Again, if you don't know the California Transition Alliance, take some time and explore the website. I used to call the Transition Alliance the basics, my Bible, when my daughter was in, I think I discovered it when I was 15. I went to see Sue Sawyer in Sacramento, and so that's when all this was introduced to me. So in any event, I thank you all for coming. Thank you, Gabriel, I hope that we spoke, slow enough for you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it so much. Any last words? I give the last words to our three distinguished presenters.
Thank you so much for having us. We hope you want to join us. We are a volunteer organization. We're a 501(c), and we appreciate anyone who wants to come on board and help us. Tracy?
Okay. Yes, no, just thank you and start that planning early.
Yep, yep. It's
Absolutely.
never too early, never
Never-
too late. So if you have an
And
18-year-old there, never too late, but also
That's
never
right.
too early.
and
Okay.
ask questions, ask questions, ask questions.
Yes, that's right. And that's why we do these things, so that you figure out what questions to ask, because nobody has all the answers, but we got a lot of questions. All right. Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you
See you
guys.
soon. Take care.